We all know why you're here, but you're going to have to wait about 92 minutes for that. Good afternoon, everybody. A good Thursday afternoon to you all. Excuse me.
Friday Eve.
January 25th, 2024. This is the Southside Beat, as we are usually at 3 p.m. Eastern. But today, an hour early, as we prepare for the main event coming up at 3:30. For those that are not aware yet, Ramon Foster, 1/2 hour before his typical start time, 3:30 Eastern, will have Mason Rudolph on as a special guest. So you're not going to want to miss that. He's Halicke. I'm Corey Crisan on a different laptop today, getting the work PC service today. So hopefully the camera quality isn't terrible, the mic quality isn't terrible. This is an old PC that I'm operating on. So doing the best we can today, but let's do this, Chris.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're going to clear the area for Mason and Ramon later on, and we'll let those two talk about Mason Rudolph. We won't go into Mason Rudolph today. We'll let Mason Rudolph go into Mason Rudolph today. But I thought a good place for us to go to today would be Teryl Austin, and that is the reports that he will be back with the Steelers as the defensive coordinator in 2024 and 2025. The reports, nothing confirmed by the team yet, that he is signing a 2-year contract. Can't call it an extension, really, because the contract did expire at the end of the season. So Teryl Austin coming back as the Steelers defensive coordinator. I wrote about it today. It's on DKPittsburghSports.com. But here we go. I think it's a good move. I think it's a move that kind of needed to happen in some ways. And I think it was fair to evaluate Teryl Austin's defense as a whole throughout the season. But I think at the end of the day, this is the best move. This is the best result for the Steelers, is bringing Teryl Austin back.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are, and as the headline or title of today's show, positives outweighing negatives. I think there are more positives than negatives. I don't want to discount the fact that there definitely needs to be improvements schematically. I don't think that's a. I don't think that can really be avoided, and I think that's pretty obvious and fair at this point. I do like, one of the things that I really do like about Teryl Austin's defense is the way that they disguise some coverages. I think they do a pretty good job of doing that. If they can get a little bit better up front in terms of disguising pressures and stuff like that up front, I think they would be a much better defense before the snap, and then that in turn helps the rest of the players that you have. And obviously the Steelers' better players are on the defensive side of the ball. Even if you take Cam Hayward out of that discussion, given age, injury, whatever have you, you have the best defensive player on the planet in TJ Watt. And then you have Minkah Fitzpatrick, who, despite having a down year, is still one of the best safeties in the game. And then you have a Rookie of the Year candidate in Joey Porter Jr. at cornerback. You got a lot of good players on that defense. And if they can get better at disguising some pressures and get a little bit better before the snap up front, I think it's not out of the realm of possibility, and the Steelers are definitely much better off on the defensive side schematically than they were on the offensive side. And we'll get to offensive stuff here in a second, since there is a formal candidate now for the offensive coordinator job. But yeah, Teryl Austin coming back. I do find it interesting that it was a 2-year deal. Coordinators typically get 3 years. Now, I don't know if that's like the Steelers just changing their philosophy on that. They're just, now it's just not an automatic 3-year deal, or maybe it's just we aren't comfortable giving 3 years right now. We kind of only want to go with 2.
Right. And Mark brings it up here. Teryl Austin's a master strategist in the secondary. I mean, look at Joey Porter Jr.'s development over the course of the season. Everybody was screaming from the mountaintops, week 1, start Joey Porter Jr., and they took their time with him, and it paid off. And he turned into a really good shutdown cornerback. And then they had to go without 3 starting safeties at many points this season. Obviously, DeMonte KZ getting suspended for, the final 3 games of the year. Keanu Neal missing significant time with injury. Minkah Fitzpatrick missing time with injury, playing with a broken hand. And then literally the finding of Eric Rowe finding a guy that was off the couch, that was off of, practice squads, has been a Super Bowl champion before, and making something out of Eric Rowe. Like, I think there's a lot to be said about what Teryl Austin did in that secondary, and then moving Pat P to safety, I think worked.
Yeah.
Say what you want about Levi Wallace and say what you want about James Pierre, but I think by and large, the secondary had a relatively decent year, all things considered. And look, like, B-Phil brings it up here. It will help not playing 2/3 of the season and not being so injured. I mean,
attrition was a huge part of it.
Yeah, you could apply that to every level of the defense, whether it was Cam Hayward and then the middle linebackers, obviously, and the safeties, obviously. So look, I think that, and I wrote about this in some way. Number one, you don't want to have to search for two coordinators when you really don't have to. I don't think the Steelers really had to get rid of Teryl Austin. I don't think they had to do that because I think, again, the positives did outweigh the negatives.
Yeah.
Number two, I don't think you want to have two coordinator searches going on at the same time when you're a team that is very clear and intent on trying to win now. And I love the point here that Mark brings up about Mike Tomlin. Does this mean that Mike Tomlin's extension would be 2 years also? What do you all think? So Mike Tomlin has 1 year left next year. And who's to say that maybe he doesn't re-sign a 1-year deal or he doesn't re-sign a 2-year deal? I think some of what Mike Tomlin could potentially sign for, being that an extension is on the way, this is directly via Art Rooney, he could sign for an extra year, 2 extra years. I think some of that will depend on who the offensive coordinator is and how long he gets on his contract. So I think that's a distinct possibility, is that Mike Tomlin and Teryl Austin could see this thing through together. And that maybe could be some explanation to the 2-year contract for Austin.
Yeah. I mean, well, a 2-year extension for Tomlin would actually make it 3 more years of Tomlin.
Correct.
So, I don't think, and I highly doubt, very highly doubt they would extend Tomlin for just an additional year. So I don't think that those 2 contracts are going to be married with each other.
Right.
Darren, just for verification purposes, Darren said Austin has the DB background. Curry, the linebackers, drawing a blank on who the D-line coach is. It's Carl Dunbar, and then Denzel Martin coaches the outside linebackers. So those are, like, in terms of like up front, since outside linebackers are edge defenders in today's NFL, that matters, when it comes to playing up front. So your 2 coaches up front are Carl Dunbar for the guys on the inside, and then the edge guys are coached by Denzel Martin.
And there's a lot of love for Carl Dunbar inside of that building.
And Martin.
And Denzel Martin, absolutely. Yeah. But I'm not going to make this a stretch to say this, and I don't think it's a stretch to say this.
Yep.
If it weren't for Carl Dunbar, who knows, like TJ Watt talked about publicly about his desire to play for Mike Tomlin as being a major reason why he extended. But Carl Dunbar is kind of the nucleus with all these Wisconsin guys. There's a big thread. There's a big connection there with all of these Wisconsin guys and Carl Dunbar. I wrote about it, actually. If you want to go back to over the summer, I wrote about this when I talked about Keanu Benton and bringing him in and his more specific, with the Wisconsin connection, tying in Nick Herbig. There's a big connection there to be had with Carl Dunbar. And Carl Dunbar and Mike Tomlin have a long history together, dating back to their time, I believe, with the Vikings together. So Dunbar, seasoned veteran, has really good connections. I think that Dunbar's a really solid position coach. Aaron Curry, I thought, did a phenomenal job with the inside linebackers.
Yep.
They love Denzel Martin with the outside backers. And I think Grady Brown, quite frankly, has defensive coordinator potential within him.
He does.
I think that's there. So I'm really comfortable with the defensive staff. Now they're going to have to replace a couple of assistants. We just saw one leave, obviously. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But
one guy who I saw floated out there for as a not like this might be happening, but just kind of like this would be a cool, like, deserving candidate to kind of fill the Gerald Alexander role. Former Steelers safety Mike Mitchell, who has been coaching with the Colts as an assistant defensive backs coach, and so I think that'd be interesting too. I obviously did not float that one out there, but interesting. That he came up. Former Steeler, has played for Mike Tomlin, understands Mike Tomlin's philosophies on the defensive side of the ball. Joey Porter, had some success as a coach, wasn't a great coach, but still, lasted a few years under Tomlin. And so I actually think Mike Mitchell might be a little bit better of a coach. Typically the guys, not saying, and this is not taking anything away from who Mike Mitchell was as a player, because he was a pretty good safety. Typically the players that were really good don't turn into really good coaches. And typically the players that were either like okay or even just not good players turn into really good coaches. That's not a, obviously, for instance, in every single time, there are obviously some players who are great and then can turn into good coaches, but it just an observation that might be an interesting ad.
I like this comment from Miltank's uncle at the end of it. We have a great defensive staff. No need to shake it up now. And I get bringing back TA. That's a big point of it. Put it this way, okay? The Steelers need to make changes on the offensive staff. Obviously, the offensive coordinator, it's very evident that it's going to be the quarterback's coach as well. But they need is the key word, to make changes on the offensive side of the ball because it is not good. There are many positives to point out about the defensive side of the ball, even despite TJ Watt's injury for the postseason and Cam Hayward and the inside linebackers and the safeties. All of that stuff being said, the Steelers were still 6th in the NFL in points allowed per game. That is an amazing accomplishment. That's a big credit to Teryl Austin. Now, I think there's things that Teryl Austin can clean up. That being, I think number one for me is blitz packages and some of the zone stuff that they do. And I think some of that's personnel related. I think Teresa was mentioned it here. Or if the Steelers aren't going to use Minka in a way maximizing his strengths, don't you think it'd be better to trade him? I think they couldn't use Minka to his strengths this year because they were running out of bodies. They had to play Minka Fitzpatrick, who can play anywhere on the field. They had to put him everywhere on the field, if that makes sense. Because at times, when Quan Alexander, Cole Holcomb go down in separate games for lengthy amounts of time, they have to move Minka into the box more. When Patrick Peterson has to move to safety, you're going to put Minka at corner some more. Like, I just think that Minka's season this year was an anomaly. I don't read too much into Minka having the kind of season that he did. He obviously also battled injuries. I'm a little surprised to see that he made the Pro Bowl, but that's besides the point. Like, I think Minka's season really can't be read into too much. What's that?
It's the Pro Bowl. It's fan voting, man.
I get that, but still.
The Pro Bowl is not, I mean, it is, and this is nothing, this is not a shot at fans or anything like that, but the prestige of the Pro Bowl has gone down and down. I mean, it's first off, it's the worst all-star game in all 4 major sports.
Yeah.
By far too. Like, it's not even close. And just all pro is where the truly real, like the great players in this game, that's where they get recognized. Pro Bowl. I mean, come on. Tyler Huntley was a Pro Bowler last year. Come on, man.
All right, let's go to the offensive side of the ball. And I think the title of the show, again, positives outweighing negatives. That talks about Teryl Austin. But I think one would look at the prospect the Steelers are looking at for offensive coordinator and easily say the negatives are outweighing the positive. This being Thomas Brown, the offensive coordinator, I guess you could say interim offensive coordinator for the Panthers, who was interviewed by the Steelers. That was confirmed yesterday. Real quick, Joshua Dobbs says, if we're sticking with Kenny, I'd be contacting Mark Whipple. No way. No college guys. No connections to Kenny. No, don't do it. No, they can't do that. They're not going to do that. But all right, let's talk about Thomas Brown. Prospective hire, right? A guy that has been interviewed, the first interview that has been confirmed by the Pittsburgh Steelers for the offensive coordinator position. Swan269 asked you, Chris, and you wrote about candidates in your Chalk Talk the other day.
Yeah.
So you've obviously also been in tune with this, and Swan asked you, what are the concerns about Brown from the Panthers, if any? I think everybody again would red flag this because the Panthers offense sucked last year, and Bryce Young did not develop into anything. Like, there's no positives to look at from the Panthers offense, but is there any positive to take from Thomas Brown as a prospective candidate?
No, I don't take anything. So there was a lot of pushback. Like when we put this in the feed, there was a lot of pushback. Lots of people. I mean, Mark kind of represents it here. Forget about anything coming from Carolina. I'm excited about the dude from LA. Like, that's pretty much it. It's like, okay, you're excited about the dude from LA. That's Zach Robinson, but again, it's been reported that the Steelers have requested an interview with him. He's not a formal candidate yet.
Correct.
Once the Steelers interview him, then he'll be a formal candidate. The thing with Thomas Brown is, like, listen, yes, like if you look at just Carolina, yeah, that's not an interesting candidate, but you have to look at full body of work when you look at potential candidates. the 3 prior seasons that, like, before he became offensive coordinator of the Panthers, he worked under Sean McVay. He was running backs coach for those first 2 seasons. Then in years 2 and 3, he became assistant head coach. And then in year 3 also became tight ends coach on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 years of assistant head coach under Sean McVay, 3 total years under Sean McVay in that offense, knows that offense, coming from that system, coming from that coaching tree. That is what's interesting to me. Now, is this a slam dunk hire, in my opinion, on the surface? No, it's not. But is it an interesting candidate that you can at least bring in? Absolutely. Why not? I mean, shoot, like, okay, let's look at all the possibilities here. Rick says Emmett Brown.
Emmett Brown, yeah.
But yeah, well, and Spice, kind of makes a good point here. He wasn't running Frank Reich's offense, not the offense he's used to running. And also Beefield brings this up. Carolina is dysfunctional because of their owner, but they're a dysfunctional franchise. It's the worst run franchise in football. Like, expecting Thomas Brown to do anything with literally nothing on offense. And even Bryce Young is kind of like, I'm not so sure, but still, like, literally nothing else on offense. Like, he's not a miracle worker. Nobody can do anything with that. Mm-hmm. So I part of the interview process is not bringing in guys just to, like, see if they're a possible candidate for offensive coordinator. Yes, that's the job they're interviewing for. But if you learn enough from them where you might choose someone else, say possibly Zach Robinson, but then they're like, you know what, maybe Eddie Faulkner wants to move on. So they might approach Thomas Brown. Hey, maybe you want to be our running backs coach. Or maybe you want, just whatever else. Like, there's other possibilities, and that's also can work out for a new quarterbacks coach as well. So absolutely bring him in, learn some stuff. He's a young coach.
Yeah.
He's from the McVay tree. It's not a waste of time at all. Do I think he's the leading candidate based off of formal candidates plus reported candidates? No, but it's not a waste of time. It's not one of those things where I'd be more interested in Thomas Brown over Cliff Kingsbury. I'll put it that way.
Okay, I have 2 theories right here. Number 1, and this one might be a little, like, maybe overthinking in a way. The two of the 3 names that have been at least linked to either be requested for or actually interviewed for this job are Zach Robinson and Thomas Brown, both McVay guys. Mm-hmm. What are the odds that Mike Tomlin / Art Rooney / Omar Khan, whoever, saw the dynamic between Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan last year as co-coordinators, so to speak, and maybe wants to run that concept back?
No, I don't.
But I'm just saying, what are the odds of that being a thing? And then you have 2 guys, but then you have 2 guys that came from the McVay tree, being Brown and Robinson. Robinson obviously has quarterback experience. And those 2 guys commandeer the ship together. That's just theory. Number 2, and I think this is way down here. This is due diligence until Clint Kubiak is available on some level. That's I think a fair thing to say, is that this is due diligence until Clint Kubiak, until the 49ers lose.
Yeah.
And
if you're a Steelers fan, obviously root for the 49ers to lose this weekend.
Right. So if the 49ers lose this weekend, or even if the Lions lose, maybe they look at somebody from the Lions.
That's possible.
But if the 49ers lose on Monday, I mean, we could be hearing Clint Kubiak's name being, requested or anything like that. So those are the 2 things that speak to me, at least as far as the tone of the Steelers offensive coordinator search so far. Given it's been almost a week and a half now that they've lost that playoff game, obviously they're going to take the week to analyze things. But we're into Thursday now of the week after, and there's only been 1 interview and 2 other guys that have been requested or have been talking to the Steelers about it. So that's just me reading into what we know right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a very slow process. The Steelers are not the only team that are looking for an offensive coordinator right now. And I can tell you right now that the Steelers are not the only team that is interested in possibly interviewing Clint Kubiak.
No.
So he's going to be one of the hottest commodities once he's available for interviews. He's not available for interviews right now because the 49ers are still playing football. So, I mean, let's just be real about that. So don't expect any. So if this is a slow moving process, it's going to be that. So just prepare yourselves for that. Don't expect the Steelers to have anybody hired by Monday. Even if the 49ers lose on Sunday, again, Kubiak is going to, he's going to be sought after. Right. He's going to go on multiple interviews. I don't think the Steelers are at all going for any kind of co-offensive coordinator type situation. I think that they are, and honestly, the right way to go is to go with what the league is doing. Find a guy who wants to come in, who wants to really build an offense and have it be his offense. I think Mike Tomlin is there. I think, like, regardless of people saying, "Oh, Mike Tomlin wants to have control over this," like, no, Mike Tomlin is way more focused on controlling the defensive side of the ball. Right. I really think he wants to be able to find an offensive coordinator who he can trust, who knows how to win, who knows how to score points in the NFL in 2024, and say, "Take it. It's yours." Now, obviously, it's going to fit under the umbrella of the style of football that Mike Tomlin wants to play. But I think he's also using this interview process as a way to learn and adjust his style of coaching as well. So Mike Tomlin's smart enough to know it's happened over the course of how he's coached his defenses. He's smart enough to know you have to adapt in this game or you will die off. Yep. You just will. And Mike Tomlin is smart enough to know that. And I think he's starting to really realize that on the offensive side of the ball, that, listen, we can't keep doing these Randy Fichtner's, Matt Canada stuff anymore. It's got to be a new guy who understands new concepts that work in this NFL. And going with code coordinators is not a way to do that.
Mark brings up Jim Harbaugh, and I'm glad you did because I was going to mention that too. Yeah. Jim Harbaugh going to LA shakes the AFC up. That's what Mark says here. Not only that, but also the Bengals offensive coordinator, Brian Callahan, being hired by the Titans. That also shakes things up. So effectively, the Bengals now have an offensive coordinator opening that they need to find.
They just filled it.
Well, they just filled it. Well, that's what that created is what it did.
Yeah.
And now Jim Harbaugh going to the Chargers opens up Kellen Moore for other teams. Yep. And today, these are just reports that the Eagles and the Browns were looking into Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator. So
I wonder how that's going to work if, like, let's, for instance, if Kellen Moore is hired in Cleveland, like how that would work under Stefanski. That'd be interesting.
Well, I mean, maybe in the same dynamic that Van Pelt worked with Stefanski or similar.
Yeah, I don't know. It's always interesting to me, when the head coach is more of an offensive minded guy. It's always interesting how that dynamic will work because you obviously have head coaches who are play callers. Like, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, like those guys, like that they're running the show. I mean, yeah, it's interesting.
And you would think that the next guy the Steelers hire could be a guy that is rising, could be a guy that is, I don't want to say going to become a Tomlin disciple by any stretch, but is a guy that has longevity in this league left in front of him. And that the Steelers, becoming the Steelers offensive coordinator is not the end of the road for this person. I think that's when you talk about legitimate change that the Steelers need to make, and that Mike Tomlin talked about in making change, interviewing Thomas Brown is a change. Getting Zach Robinson in the building is change. Cliff Kingsbury is less of change than those two would be. This is the type of thing, and I think I've said it before here. This is the type of thing where Mike Tomlin needs to zag when everybody expects him to zig. As Steeler Girl 808 says here, we need young and modern. Young and modern would be change. Young and modern would be something way different than what Mike Tomlin has done before. So Thomas Brown, if that's considered young and modern and different and change, then okay, let's see this through. I don't think he's going to become the next Steelers offensive coordinator, but I'm glad they brought him in the building for an interview. So we'll see what happens. There's going to be a lot more developments as, of course, next week comes along too. I've got the conference championships.
I've got another thought, and maybe I'll end up going into a lot more in depth in this in a column. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. This offensive coordinator search is an opportunity. When we talk about like the McVay tree and the Shanahan tree and the Tomlin tree, and I understand people, Tomlin didn't have a tree. But I'm just saying, like, when just thinking about that dynamic, this hire could be a really good way to start off a chain reaction for the Steelers, because if they can nail this coordinator hire, and it's Kubiak or Robinson or whoever, and this is a guy who will eventually in 2 or 3 years become a head coaching candidate. And I think it's one of the reasons why Tomlin's been so reserved to want to get one of these guys, because he knows he's going to have to replace him in 2 or 3 years, especially if it's a slam dunk hire. But the thing is that if you can hire person A, and it's an awesome offensive coordinator, and then also bring in another guy who's kind of young, who can kind of also learn under that guy for during that time, you've got somebody else who can step in and replace him. Mm-hmm. And then that guy can bring in somebody he knows, and you can bring somebody in and replace him. So it's not a Tomlin tree per se, if they're coming from the Shanahan tree or the McVay tree, but it's a way to foster the passing of the baton from that style of offense through the Steelers themselves. And so I think it's an interesting way to look at this hire being so important, because it can set the Steelers up, even if it's a guy who won't be with the Steelers in 3 years, because like I said, if they get a slam dunk on this hire and he's gone taking a head coaching job in 3 years, they can possibly bring in a guy who can also, again, take the baton, be the next guy up. So I think that's just an interesting way to look at this hire as well.
All right, one more comment here. Chris Cushman says, how long will it take to hire an OC? Not long. It'll take weeks. Before the end of February, certainly.
Yeah, before the combine, for sure.
Yeah, before the end of February, certainly. And then Hodge here. Let's wrap the show with this. I hope all Tomlin haters take time to listen to yesterday's Ramon Foster show. Alejandro Villanueva gives an assessment nobody could ever argue with, and Hodge brings it up there. Yesterday, if you haven't seen it yet or listened to it yet, Ramon had Alejandro Villanueva on the Ramon Foster show yesterday on Wednesday. You're going to want to check that out, because in 1 hour from right now, on the same place you found this, on DK Pittsburgh Sports on YouTube, Ramon Foster will be joined by one Mason Rudolph. You're not going to want to miss that. We're clearing the stage. We're clearing the area. We're getting out. We're vacating. You all, we hope, stay for it. It comes in 1 hour time, live at 3:30 Eastern, right here where you found this. And that's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to hear that. I can't wait to hear Ramon chop it up with Mason. I know those two have a good relationship, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's I'm really, really excited to watch that. And yeah, if you did not watch yesterday's interview with Al Villanueva, man, that was phenomenal. It's always good to see Ramon, talk with, guys who, he obviously spent time with whenever he was wearing a Steelers uniform. And yeah, that was really cool to watch for sure. Yeah. And I think that today's, if there's a way to possibly upstage it, it's today with Mason Rudolph. And I'm excited to watch that. I know those guys are going to kill it. So there's just one final thought here.
Good.
Steeler Girl brought this up earlier in the show. She said it's worrisome that so many other teams need offensive coordinators. I think that this is part, if you look at what happened throughout the league this past year, a lot of offenses struggled, even some of the better ones. I mean, shoot, I was a Patrick Mahomes owner in fantasy football. Believe me, I felt that. Okay. When you look at offenses throughout the league, it was just kind of down, and defenses are starting to get a lot smarter. They're starting to find better ways to disguise coverages, to mix up coverages, to defend what the best offenses in the league are doing. And that's why even guys who have such great offenses and great systems like Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay and those guys, they're having to adapt their offenses and evolve their offenses. They have to, because again, this league, we start thinking of it as offense is so far ahead of defense. Well, defense is starting to catch up a little bit. And that's why I think so many teams are trying to figure out what's the right formula, what's the right answer here. And so they might be willing to move on from an offensive coordinator that wasn't too bad, but they're like, we're not going to figure out what defenses are doing with this guy there. So they're trying to find somebody else. So it's just interesting that the Steelers are not the only ones who struggle with offense this past year. All right. It's kind of across the league, and it's it unfortunately makes this hire a little bit more difficult because there are so many other teams looking for OCs.
I think another part of that is because with this like sweeping trend of quarterbacks, right? Like think like 5 years ago, like when Allen and Mahomes were drafted, for example, you know, those guys develop and teams start overcompensating, so to speak, by drafting defense and by spending high grade picks on defense and by building around like, okay, think of the Jets, for example. Okay. Like for as bad as their offense might have been, of course they didn't have Aaron Rodgers this year. They still had a really good defense. The Jets are built to stop Josh Allen, and the Steelers are built to stop Lamar Jackson, and the Ravens are built to stop Kenny Pickett. Like some of these defenses are just compensating for the overall influx of talent that has come in over the offensive side of the ball in recent memory. So the NFL's cyclical. Sometimes it's a defense league, sometimes it's an offense league. It's very much an offense league. And let's end with this here from Brian. When does the Ramon Foster show start today? In 1 hour, 3:30 Eastern.
Yep.
Right here on DK Pittsburgh Sports. Ramon Foster will be joined by Mason Rudolph at 3:30. You're not going to want to miss that.
Nope.
And in case you missed it yesterday, we'll give you a little buffer right here. Giving you an hour buffer today. Ramon had Alejandro Villanueva on yesterday. Check that out on replay right here on DK Pittsburgh Sports.
Won't have time to watch the entire thing between now and
no, but you can get started at least.
Yeah.
Either here on DK Pittsburgh Sports on YouTube or where podcasts are found, of course, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify. In 59 minutes now, Ramon will be joined by Mason Rudolph. Check that out. Please remember to like, share, subscribe. We appreciate you all. We'll be back for a Football Friday tomorrow to talk some divisional results in some conference championship. There you go.
Mark. That's what I was laughing at earlier, by the way.
Yeah.
I saw that comment come across.
Chris's Tony Romo impression. Tony
Jim!
Well, you're going to get more of that for the AFC Championship, too, this
and
Sunday,
the Super Bowl.
So get ready for that. And the Super Bowl. So get ready for that.
Super Bowl.
We'll be back tomorrow to break down. We'll be back tomorrow to break down some division, of course, results and some conference championship Sunday. We'll break that down tomorrow. He's Chris. I'm Corey. This has been the Southside Beat. Mason Rudolph coming up in 58 minutes. Stay tuned for that. Talk to you all tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.